Hi everyone, welcome back. It's good to be with you again. Today I wanted to just go over a couple of books that I actually shared with you last week on the video History Renewed. Just a little bit about each country. A couple of countries in Tartaria mentioned in here as well. This is the Epitome of History. So I'll just crack on and read it and see if you pick up on anything, because it's quite interesting. I did the other day notice when I was reading some of this a contradiction in it, so I don't know how accurate this information is, but it's still nonetheless quite interesting to see what was perceived back then, or what we're led to perceive today from back then. Either way, I don't know. So this is the first country I'm going to read, Lao Tong. The Khitans were a people of eastern Tartary who dwelt to the north and the northeast of the province of Pichili in China, particularly in Lao Tong. In process of time, they subdued all the countries between Korea and Kashgar, besides several northern provinces of China, as will appear in the sequel. The Khitan Empire began in Lao Tong and is reckoned to have commenced in the year 907 AD. It continued 219 years under the 9 princes and gave more trouble to China than all the inhabitants of Tartary. When Shi King Tang usurped the throne of China in 937, he was assisted by these Tartars, who had now changed their name from Khitan to that of Lao, and he sacrificed the interest of his country by rewarding them with 16 cities in the province of Pichili, besides an annual tribute. This donation greatly increased the power and ambition of this restless people, and was the occasion of numberless wars that ravaged China for many centuries. At length, the Emperor Wei Song called in the assistance of Niuchi, or Eastern Tartars, who at this time had assumed the name of Qin. They joined him with a powerful army and eventually put an end to the Empire of Lao in 1125. That's it, right? Yeah, so in a bit I'll keep reading. But this right here is saying the Empire of Lao ended and got put an end of in 1125. The Niuchi Tartars next turned their arms against the Chinese, their late allies, and succeeded in obtaining possession of this country. The Khitan monarchy was afterwards restored by Genghis Khan, who, though he raised a prince of that country to the throne of Lao in 1211, so right there, the Empire of Lao was ended in 1125, and he raised a prince of that country, Genghis Khan, in 1211. So, I mean, I could be understanding that wrong, but that's basically contradiction itself in my mind for some reason. Anyway, I'll carry on reading. May be considered as having brought this country under the dominion of the Mongols, then underwent all the revolutions of the Empire of China. On this event, this was when the Empire was ended, 1125. On this event, one of the princes Lao left the country with a chosen band of followers, and forcing his way through the vast districts of Tartary, ultimately fixed his residence in one of the eastern provinces of Little Bukharia. These new invaders are called the Karakhetans by the Persian historians, and their empire, which soon rose to a degree of eminence among those petty states, continued 88 years till it was ultimately reduced by the Khwarezmians in 1207. These minor revolutions are not noticed on the charts. So Manchu is Eastern Tartary. This country was formerly inhabited by a race of men called Niuchi, or Eastern Tartars, who appeared to have been established there ever since the year 907, and who were probably subject or dependent upon the Empire of Lao. But Aguta revolted from them in 1114, and having obtained several victories over the former sovereign, assumed the title of emperor himself, gave the name of Qin to his new possessions in 1118. He afterwards joined his arms with those of the Chinese and succeeded in putting an end to the Empire of Lao in 1125. Then, extending his views of aggrandizement, he broke his treaty with the Emperor of China He seized his provinces of Pichili and Shenxi towards the middle of the century. This new empire greatly encroached on the Chinese dominions. For by the treaty between the two countries in 1141, the emperor not only gave up all of the northern parts of his dominions, but agreed to render tribute for the southern parts which were left in his possession. The Tartar king, however, soon broke the peace, and hostiles were frequently renewed between the two countries. The Qin Empire was likewise frequently engaged in war with the neighbours, the Mongols, whom they rendered tributary. But when Genghis Khan laid the foundation of his mighty power, this country was one of the first to experience the terror of his arms in 1211. The Qin monarch, however, defended himself bravely against the united efforts of the Mogul and Chinese emperors, and it was not till after a contest almost uninterrupted by 23 years, that he was obliged to submit to their dominion. The Moguls having reduced China in that course of the same century, this country underwent the revolutions of that empire till the year 1616, when an attempt was made to remove some of the tribes from Lao Tong. This so exasperated them that they took up arms and, throwing off Chinese yoke, rendered themselves independent. Their success probably induced other parts of the empire to hoist the standard of rebellion, for in the course of a few years, the whole of China was a scene of civil war. The Manchus sided with the party of the rebels and carried their arms into the heart of China in 1627. Tai Song, their general, was victorious in every quarter and would have been proclaimed emperor if death had not put a stop to his career in 1636. His nephew, Zun Qi, was, however, afterwards raised by the imperial dignity in 1644, and his country thus became once more united to China. The Manchu Tartars now rule over the whole of the Chinese dominion. Excuse me. Sorry, I did just save tabs of different parts, but I might as well just read through for a little while. Obviously a disclaimer, I can't read it all. Don't want to have my channel taken down, seeing as I've got 2 strikes for reading one book, the Book of King Og. So yeah, just read a little bit more from this for a little while. So China, the original form of government in this country was monarchical. In this opinion, the Chinese historians agree, and they produce a series of kings or emperors from Fo He to the present time. The history of China during the reign of Fo He and his immediate successors is fabulous, and the chronology of that period altogether uncertain. The country was divided into a number of districts or provinces governed by princes who were absolute with their own territories, but who acknowledged the sovereignty of one of who was styled the emperor, who in the process of time became absolute. These sovereigns are divided into 22 dynasties. The first dynasty is called Haya, was founded by Yu 2207 BC and consisted of 17 emperors who reigned 440 years. I got a thing about 400 odd years in the Bible. It's talking about people going into slavery 400 years, and there's always things about 400-ish odd years. Just wondering if that's the length of a reset, but that's just another thought as I'm passing through. Anyway, Qing Tang, the founder of the second dynasty, 1767, was the author of many excellent laws and regulations, and left the country in flourishing constitution government, might perhaps something like that Germany's, in accordance to one prince's families records. The Chinese boasting they have records back as far as many thousands, nay millions of years. Anyway, so where do we get to? Many excellent laws and regulations, and left the country in a flourishing condition. Yet few of his successors imitated his example or merited a crown. The third dynasty commenced in 1123. The arts and sciences flourished under patronage of this family, but the country was much harassed by the Tartars, who carried on their depredations till the time of the Confucius. The great man was born in 552 BC, and he died 73rd year of his age in 479 BC. He was the prince of the Chinese philosophers, and the best as well as the wisest man with whom this nation was ever blessed. His memory is still held in profound veneration. His posterity enjoyed the greatest privileges. His works are of the highest authority. During the 4th dynasty, Shi Huangti, alias Qing, was a prince of a vast and enterprising genius. After a successful war of 25 years against the petty kings, reunited the detached principalities to the empire, and greatly extended the limits of his dominions. In order to check the incursions of the Tartars, he ordered the Great Wall to be built around 215 BC. Now, I don't know if that's true, because I saw something recently about how the Wall of China was built actually the other way around, so it's actually holding people in China. Anyway, or at least he united several walls that had been formerly constructed with the same design, so the walls were already there anyway. He changed the form of government, introduced new laws and regulations, and advanced the empire to a state of prosperity unknown in former ages. See, when they're talking about ages as well, I think they're talking about them 300 or 400 years reset times, rather than, pre-flood, pre-Adam kind of ages. That might be considered by future ages as the founder of the empire. He ordered all the Chinese records to be destroyed in 213, and in this manner perished many of those most curious monuments of antiquity. Notwithstanding the power of this monarch, however, we find that before the end of his dynasty, the country was divided into no less than 20 principalities or kingdoms. Several parts of the empire were reunited by Liu Pang, alias Cao Su, founder of Han dynasty in 207 BC, which was the most illustrious that ever reigned in China. And from this epoch, the Chinese history is curious and interesting. The princes of this dynasty had frequent wars with the Huns and the Tartars, who seized every opportunity of plundering and desolate that country. But afterwards, a reign of 1300 years, the great power of the Huns was utterly destroyed in 93 AD. At the commencement of the 6th dynasty, 220, China was divided into 3 separate states, and though these were united by Sima Yu, the founder of the Xin dynasty, about 265, about 15 years after he ascended the throne in 280, yet the country was soon after the seat of incessant hostiles. So the extensive plains of Sogdiana on the eastern side of the Caspian, where they preserved the name of the Huns with the epithet of Ulaflates and Naphtalites. The remaining part directed their monarch towards Volga, and the banks of which they remained near 1700 years, but have since returned in 1771 to their native seat in the frontiers of the Chinese Empire. Every province becoming the prey of the most powerful invader, the history of the troublesome period affords little interest to that posterity. The Tartars of Niichi and Liao appear to have obtained a footing in China about the year 907 and were very troublesome neighbours. The dry recital of the successive dynasties would neither amusing nor instructive. The 16th dynasty was founded in 937 by Shi King Tang, alias Cao Su, a man of unknown origin who espoused the daughter of the reigning prince, and whom Cao Su afterwards deposed with the assistance of a powerful tribe of Tartars from Laotong. Revolutions during those times were frequent in China, owing chiefly to the indolence and effeminacy of the emperors, and to the turbulent ambition of their ministers. As a reward for their services, Cao Su ceded to the Tartars 16 cities in the northern part of China and promised them an annual tribute. But encouraged by their success, these new allies meditated the entire conquest of the country. Liu Qi-yen, the Chinese general, taking advantage of these commotions, basically betrayed the emperor and seized the throne himself in 947, assuming the title of Kaotsu II. The second prince of this dynasty, however, was in this turn disposed by his general in 951, who founded the dynasty Huqiu. This subsisted 10 years only and was succeeded by the Great Song dynasty, and the emperors of this family reigned 379 years. Under the patronage, and arts and sciences were cultivated, and a great number of learned men flourished at any former period. Huizong, the 8th emperor of this race, provoked at the repeated depredations of the Khitan Tartars, entered into the treaty with the Niuchi Tartars to exterminate them, and their united forces succeeded in putting an end to their dominion. The chief of the Niuchi Tartars, however, elated with his success, invaded the provinces of Pichili and Kensi, where he took from his new ally, and by the middle of this century had not only reduced all the northern parts of China, but had rendered himself tributary. When Genghis Khan had celebrated Mughal chief returned from his western expedition, resolved to chastise the king of Haya, who had favoured his enemies in his absence, according to the monarch, an army and dominions of this monarch. So, I'll just carry on reading for now, and put an end to his kingdom. He then joined his forces to those of the Chinese emperor, with a view of exterminating the Qin Empire, which was affected by the following year. The Mongols took possession of all the conquered provinces, contrary to the treaty with the Chinese, who were to have rewarded with a share of the China, and consequently asserted their right by force of arms. The Mongols were at first highly successful, but their victorious career was at length suspended by the Chinese general Meng Kong in 1239. His death, however, inspired the Tartars with fresh courage, and the war was renewed by Mengo Khan with more vigour and success than ever. His successor Kublai Khan, or Hupilai, preserved peace with the empire for some time, till a dispute arose between the two nations, and after the ineffectual contest of some years, the whole country submitted to the arms of Kublai Khan, who was crowned emperor under the title of Chisu, and was founded the dynasty of Ivan. This prince was a great patron of the arts and sciences, and neglected nothing that would contribute to the glory of his empire or the happiness of his subjects. Academies and colleges which he founded. So, academies and colleges were all down and about 1,000 years ago. Encouragement he gave to agriculture, astronomy, and mathematics. The multitude of learned men which he attracted to his court, and the number of foreign books which he caused to be translated into his native language, render his name immortal, and outweigh the reproaches of which his enemies have charged him. The empire extended over China, Pegu, Tibet and Tartary, Cochin, China, Tonkin and Korea, paid him tribute, and the other Mongol princes established Persia, and Kipchak acknowledged his supremacy as Grand Khan. The Mongols were soon enervated by the pleasures in the company of peace and security, and beheld with indifference the prospect of their speedy downfall. Chu Yencheng, the man of mean extraction, who had been raised to the highest offices of his army, seized the favourable opportunity of delivering his country from the dominion of a foreign yoke. Being crowned emperor by his followers, assumed the title of Hongwu, and thereby founded the dynasty of Tming in 1368. From this period, the war was carried between the Chinese and Tartars for several centuries, and towards the end of this dynasty, the Chinese empire itself became a prey to intestine commotions and civil wars. The Manchu Tartars revolted from the empire in 1616, and their progress under the victorious leader Tai Song alarmed the reigning monarch. So this is a lot about China. I didn't want to do a whole video reading about China, but it goes on constantly about the wars between the Chinese and the Tartars and the Mongols, and how ultimately they're pretty much similar people, but divided and breaking away from themselves and moving on to new lands, subjugating them to their powers, and then going back and then fighting each other again. Excuse me. But yeah, this is Mongolia. This is an immense tract of country itself called Great Tartary, which lies to the north of Tibet and China, stretching from Manchu Tartary in the east of Great Bukharia in the west. Was anciently inhabited, as indeed as it is present, by various tribes, who, under the name of Turks or Tartars, assumed a degree of absolute power within their own districts, but who were all dependent at some superior state, either foreign or domestic. The early history of this country is dull and uninteresting till the beginning of the 13th century, when the remarkable exploits of this enterprising chief raised to obscurity and established an empire which then involved the fate of all Asia, which was then since the astonishment of posterity. In the year of 1182 AD, we find Ung Khan, or Presenter John of Asia, as he is sometimes called by the Europeans, prince of the tribe of Karaits. Tartary is the original seat of Huns, Avars, Turks, Moguls, and so on, whose interruptions to the various states of Europe have been occasionally referred to in the preceding pages. They in general assumed these various appellations from the name of the chief who led them to victory, but oftentimes their etymology is involved in impenetrable obscurity. Ung Khan had embraced Christianity and corresponded a very powerful sovereign, and is the greatest part of this country tributary to him. It was at this period that Temujin, the young prince of the tribe of the Moguls, or perhaps more properly the Mongols, took refuge in his court and sought his protection against his rebellious subjects. Ung Khan received him with kindness, gave him his daughter in marriage, and restored him to his dominions. But afterwards, fearing the power of so valiant a prince, he attempted to assassinate him in 1202, on which rupture took place that put all Tartary in motion. In the very first engagement, Temujin defeated the troops of Ung Khan and seized on his dominions, and soon after got himself proclaimed sovereign under the title of Zingis Khan in 1206. Under the auspices of this monarch, the Mughal Empire arrived to a degree of power and splendour unprecedented in ancient or in modern times. After reducing the whole of this country to his subjection, he turned his arms against the Qin Empire that had lately demanded their contrary tribute. He invaded the northern parts of China and their possessions, and having reduced several places, left the conquest of that country to be completed by his general Mahuli, the Roman pontiff and the princes of Europe, but doubtful whether they derived his name from Prester John. Excuse me, and this goes on about how Genghis Khan goes through and dominates all of his empire, and goes on to say how in his 60s he's done with going west and conquering up to Europe, and then he goes back to Mongol and takes on a war with two Chinese states. He goes to one of them and someone goes to another one, and then he dies at the age of 65 in that war that he went to, one of the Chinese wars. But the thing that gets me is, how did someone manage to travel to every state, city and town or whatever from his hometown all the way to Europe, which is thousands of miles, and then get all the way back to fight a war at the age of 65 without a car or without a plane? Because that's a long journey. That, you wouldn't have time to fight. You'd literally have to be running as fast as you can until your horse dies, and then jumping on another horse and then running as fast as you can again. And on top of that, the stories we're officially led to believe is that a majority of people around them ways are descended from Genghis Khan. But if he was spending all that time travelling, fighting, and potentially sleeping as well, where did he have time to sleep with so many, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of women? It just doesn't make any sense. But I've spent so much time reading all this that I've not managed to get into other countries that I wanted to read as well, but it's actually still talking about there's Uzbek Tartary as well. And what I found, from reading all through this was the borderlines of Tartary, China, Mongolia, Korea, and that part of the world all wavered over time, and they were always fighting each other, kind of much like how Europe was more recently timed. But I get the impression that Tartary is just overgrowth from southern countries, and they've gone in there. And I only say this is because I'm looking at videos on YouTube. Someone called Maximov Rowe, he's over in the Far East. He lives over there. He's got Russian accent, Russian language, and I think he lives in Kazakhstan. And he releases a video every 2 or 3 days, and he finds diamonds, golds, loads of it. He literally finds over 100 grams worth a day whenever he does a video, and it's like a 20-minute long video, and he's not even doing very much. He's just walking down the river. So when he finds some of the things he does, he finds some really lavish vases made of pure gold, and they look really detailed and really beautiful, but really old and covered in mud and half in the ground around these derelict rivers. And it makes me wonder if, maybe that was an establishment of power before the flood, that kind of area, because the amount of gold that's easily found over there. But by the sounds of it, war has been ravaging through Tartary for the last 1,000 years, and as we know right now, or as we're led to believe right now, there's not that many people there, or it's just spare land on the edge of Russia now, whatever, where there's just few people living there, but excessive amounts of land. Excuse me. But it just seems that it's always been a squabbling land, and Tartary was the name that it took between the Chinese going up there and then fighting themselves, creating different countries, and then the Mongols creating their own country and then doing the same with the Tartaris and the Chinese, and then Russia ultimately now having the name over that land. I haven't found anything yet that talks about Russia fighting Tartary and establishing themselves the owners of that land, but I'm sure there is something somewhere. But it's just, this book is really interesting. I'm not saying that this is the truth, what's said in here. It could have been written according to what information they had. It could have been written in order to lead us in the future down the wrong path. I don't know. All I do know is it does seem quite interesting. It's got information about things we're all talking about. And on another thing that I might have said before, with Genghis Khan being around in the 1200s, and me thinking that there might be 1,000 years lost on the calendar, or added on our calendar. So in fact the year 2019 right now would be 2020 right now would be 1020, and this would therefore be the year 0234, for example, and that being around 300 AD, being about the time that the so-called Roman Empire went down and lost its glory, and then became like whatever it was between then and now, the Holy Roman Empire, whatever it's called. But it would kind of tie in with not the end of the world, but the end of that time and the reset for the next set of ages or mini ages before the end of the world, if that makes any sense. This book, I ain't got any time left, but it goes on about Arabia, and it talks about Mohammed. And before I was saying I thought he might have lived in the 1500s, but this is saying here that Mohammed propagated his doctrines of success, marched with his followers in arms, and took over the city of Mecca in 630. This goes on about his life and what he did and stuff like that, but I don't have much time left on the video, so I just wanted to get it out there. But it's got all that kind of information about what the West knows, the origins of the country, or the origins of the present times of that country, at least. And and last book, I know I read this at the end of my last video as well, but this is the Freemasonry book that talks about architecture. And this book, it tells about, as I read before, and I don't want to read too much of it because I don't want to get a strike and lose my channel. And this constantly saying that we should talk about this in our formed lodges, you know, it might be considered a secret, even though it's publicly released. But it does talk about how the royal art was brought down to the Egyptians by Mitzrayim, second son of Ham, 6 years after the confusion at Babel, after the flood of 160 years, when he led thither his colony, for Egypt is Mitzrayim in Hebrew, because he found the river Nile's overflowing its banks, soon caused an improvement in geometry, which consequently brought masonry much in request. The ancient noble cities and other magnificent edifices of that country were in particularly famous pyramids, monastery of early taste and genius of that ancient kingdom. Nay, one of those ancient Egyptian pyramids is reckoned the first of the 7 wonders of the world, an account which historians and travellers is almost incredible. Sacred records, which I don't know where they are, inform us that the 11 great sons of Canaan, the youngest son of Ham, soon fortified themselves in strongholds and stately walled cities, and erected most beautiful temples and mansions. For when the Israelites were under the great Joshua, invaded their country, and found it so regularly fenced, that without the immediate intervention of God on his behalf of his peculiar people, the Canaanites were impregnable and invincible. Nor can we suppose less that the other sons of Ham, viz., and the eldest South Arabia, the Futs, now called Fez, in West Africa. Surely fair and gallant posterity of Japhet, the eldest son of Noah, even such travelled into the isles of Gentiles, must have been equally skilled in geometry and masonry. So we see that here Japhet brought it over to these parts of the world. And my point is, while I've got a little bit of time, is I don't think it was the Tartars that built the world, but it was the sons of Adam, and it was sons of Cain that created their 2 different types, and they were both mingled together throughout the world over time, as we still are, but also built at the time. And in the past, everyone built according to the knowledge, because there was world kingdoms existing all the way through history. Things were always built everywhere throughout history, whereas now we're all secularized for business purposes and corporations, that everything's kept privatized for itself, for its own profit. But anyway, my video is just about to end, and I'm sorry I didn't get much more in. Hope that was interesting, and I'll speak to you all soon. God bless.